Johnny Carson is known as one of the most famous TV hosts. He got along well with almost everyone. However, there were times when he was upset with some of his guests. Here are the guests that Johnny Carson disliked having on his show. Bob Hope. Johnny Carson and Bob Hope were famous comedians, but their working relationship was not friendly. Carson was known for his smooth interviewing style and ability to create engaging conversations. However, he reportedly did not enjoy having Bob Hope on The Tonight Show. This was mainly because Hope's rigid, scripted approach clashed with Carson's preference for natural, flowing discussions. As a result, their interviews often felt forced. Bob Hope was a legendary comedian, but by the time he frequently appeared on The Tonight Show, he had become an older performer who relied on prepared jokes and cue cards. Unlike most guests who engaged in natural back and forth with Carson, Hope preferred to deliver rehearsed one-liners. He often expected Carson to set him up for his punchlines. This made their interviews feel less like conversations and more like scripted routines, something Carson reportedly found dull. Another issue was that Hope was not a very engaging conversationalist. Carson thrived on spontaneity, but his chats with Hope were usually formulaic and predictable. Hope would often send producers a list of topics and pre-written jokes in advance, turning Carson into more of a prop than an interviewer. This lack of genuine interaction frustrated Carson, who compared talking to Hope to speaking with a promotional machine. Additionally, Hope's status as Hollywood royalty meant that The Tonight Show felt pressured to book him, even if he had nothing new to promote. Unlike other guests who shared personal stories or entertained, Hope's appearances often felt like advertisements for his latest projects. Joan Rivers. Johnny Carson and Joan Rivers had a complex relationship that changed from friendship and mentorship to strong resentment. In the early part of her career, Rivers was one of Carson's favorite guests on The Tonight Show. He admired her quick wit, bold humor, and ability to engage in sharp banter. He often invited her to be a guest host. However, their relationship took a serious turn in 1980, resulting in Carson disliking Rivers and eventually banning her from his show altogether. Carson first supported Rivers by giving her one of her first big breaks on national television in 1965. She quickly became a regular guest and often hosted the show in the early 1980s. Many believe she was being prepared to take over as Carson's successor. Despite their chemistry on air, Carson reportedly found Rivers difficult to work with at times. Her brash personality and aggressive humor sometimes conflicted with Carson's smooth hosting style. The main reason Carson disliked Rivers was a profound personal betrayal. In 1986, Rivers accepted an offer to host The Late Show starring Joan Rivers on Fox, becoming the first woman to have her own late-night talk show. However, she did not tell Carson about this move before it was announced. Carson felt surprised and deeply hurt, seeing her decision as disloyal. When Rivers tried to explain by calling him, he refused to answer and never spoke to her again. After this fallout, Carson banned Rivers from The Tonight Show, a decision that lasted nearly 30 years. Even after Carson retired, his successor, Jay Leno, continued the ban out of respect for Carson. Rivers did not return to The Tonight Show until 2014, when Jimmy Fallon took over. Wayne Newton. Johnny Carson and Wayne Newton had a well-known feud on late-night television. Carson was famous for his quick jokes and playful teasing of celebrities, but his repeated jokes about Newton created real tension. This tension led to a confrontation that made Carson very uncomfortable. Carson often made fun of Newton on The Tonight Show, targeting Newton's flashy style, dramatic performances, and hints about his masculinity. Carson's jokes usually focused on Newton's high voice, polished look, and Vegas showmanship, subtly suggesting that he wasn't as tough as other entertainers. While many stars laughed off Carson's remarks, Newton took them to heart. He was proud of his achievements and didn't like being the target of ongoing mockery. The situation escalated when Newton chose to face Carson directly. Known for his connections in Las Vegas, Newton didn't ignore Carson's comments. He reportedly entered Carson's office to confront him, warning him to stop the jokes. Some reports say Newton's message was clear. If Carson continued, there would be consequences. Carson, who usually controlled his show and never backed down from a joke, was unsettled by this encounter. He didn't engage in physical conflicts, and Newton's aggressive approach made a lasting impact. After this incident, Carson reduced his jokes about Newton, but their relationship suffered. Carson reportedly did not enjoy having Newton as a guest. While he acted professionally on air, He likely felt uncomfortable knowing the tension between them. Unlike other guests who played along with Carson's humor, Newton took things personally, which Carson didn't appreciate. Ultimately, Carson and Newton's feud showed that sometimes jokes can backfire. Newton's refusal to be a joke and his willingness to confront Carson changed their relationship in a way that was never fully healed. Mr. Rogers. Johnny Carson and Fred Rogers, also known as Mr. Rogers, were famous television figures with very different styles. Carson was known for his humor, quick wit, and ability to tease guests. He thrived on lively conversations. In contrast, Fred Rogers was soft-spoken, sincere, and avoided making fun of others. This difference made Rogers' appearances on The Tonight Show awkward, and Carson reportedly didn't enjoy having him as a guest. Carson felt uneasy with Rogers because he couldn't use his usual comedic style. Carson could joke and playfully tease most guests, but Rogers' calm and genuine nature made this problematic. Rogers didn't come to entertain traditionally. He aimed to share messages about kindness, understanding, and childhood education. While many admired his sincerity, it left less room for Carson's humor, making the interviews feel slower and less engaging than usual. Rogers' reputation as a beloved children's television figure added to Carson's challenge. If Carson joked too much about Rogers, he risked coming off as mean, which he wanted to avoid. At the same time, he couldn't engage Rogers in lighthearted conversations the way he did with other guests. This created a situation where Carson struggled to maintain energy, making the interviews stiff and uncomfortable. Another reason Carson may have found it hard to host Rogers was that The Tonight Show catered to an adult audience. Rogers' gentle topics about feelings and childhood development didn't fit the show's tone well. Although Carson respected Rogers' work, their different styles led to an awkward dynamic. Carson likely found Rogers' visits challenging, not due to personal dislike, but because their television personalities didn't work well together. Charlton Heston. Johnny Carson was skilled at making his guests feel comfortable and liked to use humor to create engaging conversations. However, he found some guests, like Charlton Heston, hard to interview. Although Carson never said he disliked Heston, several reasons suggest he didn't enjoy having him on The Tonight Show. First, Heston often seemed serious and stiff. He was known for his roles in films like Ben-Hur, The Ten Commandments, and Planet of the Apes. Heston had the aura of a classic Hollywood actor, but rarely joked like other guests. Carson thrived on fun and spontaneity. Hence, Heston's serious nature made it difficult for him to have an engaging interview. Second, Heston was known for being long-winded and serious when discussing his movies, politics, or beliefs. He often gave lengthy answers instead of participating in quick exchanges. Carson preferred guests who could keep the conversation lively, and Heston's serious approach did not fit that. Another issue might have been Heston's strong political views. He was a staunch conservative and later became a key advocate for gun rights as the president of the NRA. Heston's opinions sometimes clashed with the more liberal entertainment industry. Carson avoided political arguments but often joked about both sides, which might have upset Heston. Carson likely found Heston a difficult guest because they had different styles. Carson wanted fun conversations, while Heston brought a serious approach that didn't match The Tonight Show's late-night vibe. While Carson was always professional, he reportedly found Heston's interviews more of a task than a pleasure. Harry Belafonte. Johnny Carson and Harry Belafonte were both significant figures in entertainment, but they had different styles. Carson, known as the king of late-night TV, had a smooth interview style. However, some guests, like Belafonte, challenged him. Belafonte was a famous singer, actor, and civil rights activist. While Carson respected Belafonte's talent, he found him a difficult guest on The Tonight Show because of his serious attitude and focus on political topics. Belafonte was not just an entertainer. He was also a committed activist. Unlike many guests who promoted their latest projects or joked around, Belafonte often talked about racial justice, civil rights, and humanitarian issues. While these topics are essential, they didn't fit well with The Tonight Show's lighthearted format. Carson preferred to keep things entertaining and non-political, which made conversations with Belafonte tough. When guests got too serious, it was harder for Carson to add his usual humor. Belafonte also tended to dominate conversations, which created tension. Carson was skilled at guiding interviews to balance humor and interesting discussion. However, Belafonte often spoke for a long time, leaving little room for Carson to respond or direct the conversation. This likely frustrated Carson, who liked a more collaborative discussion. Additionally, Carson's audience tuned in for laughs and fun. A guest like Belafonte, who focused heavily on activism, sometimes changed the show's light tone. Carson worked to balance serious topics with humor, and guests who were too serious could make the interview awkward or boring. Despite these challenges, Carson remained professional, and Belafonte was well respected in the entertainment industry. However, their different styles, Carson's focus on entertainment and Belafonte's on activism, created a dynamic that Carson didn't enjoy as much compared to other guests who engaged more with the show's comedic tone. Chevy Chase. Johnny Carson was skilled at making guests feel comfortable on his show, often using humor and quick wit. However, he found some guests, including Chevy Chase, difficult to interview. Although Carson never openly said he disliked Chase, there were reasons he reportedly did not enjoy having him on The Tonight Show. One primary reason was Chase's reputation for arrogance. After gaining fame in the mid-1970s as the first weekend update anchor on SNL, Chase became known for being smug and self-important in Hollywood. Unlike other comedians eager to join Carson's banter, Chase often acted superior, which clashed with Carson's relaxed hosting style. Chase's style of humor also played a role. He relied heavily on sarcasm and had a deadpan delivery that could be mean-spirited. While Carson was known for his sharp wit, he also had warmth and charm in his comedy. Chase's more cutting approach sometimes disrupted the show's flow, making their interactions feel awkward instead of funny. When a guest didn't engage in a natural back and forth with Carson, the interview could become tense or uncomfortable, which often happened with Chase. Carson was also cautious of younger comedians who wanted to take his place. Chase, a rising star from SNL, was rumored to want to become the next king of late-night TV. This may have made Carson see him as a rival rather than a welcome guest, leading to less warmth in their interactions. Frank Sinatra. Johnny Carson and Frank Sinatra were famous entertainers, but their interactions on The Tonight Show could be tense. Sinatra was a popular guest, but his strong personality sometimes clashed with Carson's calm and professional demeanor. Sinatra could be dismissive and rude, especially if things weren't going his way. This frustrated Carson, who wanted to keep control of the show. One notable moment was when Sinatra walked on stage while Carson was still doing his monologue, interrupting him mid-joke. This highlighted Sinatra's need for attention. Sinatra also often brought a large group of people with him, which could disrupt the show and distract from the professional atmosphere that Carson preferred. Despite these challenges, Carson recognized Sinatra's star power and the interest he brought to viewers. Their tension showed Carson's skill in managing difficult guests while dealing with Sinatra's demanding behavior. George Carlin. Over the years, Johnny Carson invited many comedians to perform and be interviewed on his show. He had George Carlin on several times early in Carlin's career, but their styles did not match well. Later, Carson reportedly did not enjoy having Carlin as a guest. One reason for the tension was the difference in their comedy styles. Carson had a polished, mainstream approach that appealed to many viewers. In contrast, Carlin was known for his countercultural and rebellious humor, especially in the 1970s. As Carlin's routines became more provocative and tackled topics like politics and religion, his humor started challenging the norms Carson wanted to keep on his show. This difference likely made Carson hesitant to invite Carlin back. Carson preferred guests who followed the show's structure and maintained a certain level of decorum. Carlin's unpredictable and bold personality clashed with Carson's need for control over the show's tone. Carson often distanced himself from guests he felt disrupted the show, even if they were popular. Additionally, Carson values professionalism and keeps his private life separate. Carlin's evolving style and departure from his clean-cut image may not have aligned with Carson's personal views. While Carlin was a comedic genius, his changing humor did not fit Carson's vision for The Tonight Show, leading to a decline in their professional relationship. Don Rickles. Don Rickles was a well-known insult comic who often appeared on The Tonight Show. He was famous for his quick and unpredictable humor, which sometimes annoyed host Johnny Carson. While the audience enjoyed Rickles' wild style, it occasionally disrupted the show's flow, as Carson preferred a more orderly format. Rickles often broke the usual talk show rules by interacting with the audience and making jokes about the crew. One memorable moment was when he broke Carson's cigarette box, leading to a confrontation on Rickles' sitcom, CPO Sharky. Carson could handle jokes, but sometimes Rickles' teasing hit on Carson's insecurities, causing tension between them. Despite these issues, they respected each other and shared a unique comic bond. Rickles' energetic presence often led to funny moments, making him a guest who brought laughter and frustration to the show.